I very much appreciate being here in Hooksett tonight and for you to take time out of your evening to allow me to speak to you. I'm sure there's no disagreement in this room that this federal government taxes too much, spends too much, borrows too much, wastes too much, and is way too big. So Reagan knew of the toxicity of the government. He tried his best to get this under control. But since 1980, the government has grown 4.25 times bigger than it was in 1980, again, while doing essentially the same things. So I think that the Congress and the administrations who've been the stewards of our economy have done a lousy job. They've allowed our debt to climb. They've allowed our industrial base to shrink. And now we're looking at debts that are just outrageously high, unmanageably high. The current debt of the United States is about $11.4 trillion. Now, the unfortunate thing about the words trillion, billion, and million is they all sound so much alike. But think golf balls, watermelons, and hot air balloons. That's sort of the progression. A trillion seconds, just to give you an idea of how big a trillion is 31,750 years. So we're now $11.4 trillion in the hole. The Obama administration just came out with new projections for the next decade, and they said that they're looking at another $9 trillion, but this $9 trillion is predicated on some very rosy assumptions. It's predicated on, number one, there'll be no new spending programs in the Congress for the next 10 years. Now, when have you ever seen that happen? Number two, that the economy will grow at a steady 3% rate of growth with no recessions for the next 10 years, which is an optimistic view of the future. And three, that our cost of capital will not go up by more than 1% over the next 10 years. Now, that also is probably an unrealistically optimistic assumption, because the problem with the excessive spending and the deficits and the debt that we're accumulating is we're debasing the dollar. In less than 10 years, our dollar has declined against the euro by more than 44%. The Congress this year, during the worst recession in 80 years, voted itself $550 million to upgrade their fleet of private aircraft. Now, what is the Congress of the United States doing with private aircraft to begin with? And were the private aircraft they had not good enough? They want to spend another $550 million of our money? And then they voted themselves a petty cash increase of $93,000 per congressman. Now, times 435 members of the House and 100 members of the Senate, that's well over $40 million. And incidentally, for those of you who don't have business backgrounds, petty cash is that which is defined as just too trivial to keep track of. We can't find any general ledger spot to keep track of this money. You know, in the businesses I ran, everything, down to coffee, and office supplies, had a general ledger. Petty cash is really the meaningless pennies. Now, when you say that there's another 40, whatever we called petty cash before, another $40 million that is just too meaningless for us to keep track of, that sends a message to the rest of the $1.9 million federal employees that, hey, it's only taxpayer money. We've got all kinds of taxpayer money. So waste at the very top of the organization becomes a force multiplier, and a dollar wasted at the top can be $1 million by the time you get to the bottom. So we've got to start, and this is one of the reasons why I'm running for the Senate, we've got to start with fiscal discipline at the top. These congressional offices are so much bigger than they were 20, 30 years ago. And I mean, they've just ballooned. And a lot of the people that work in these congressional offices are there for the sole purpose of getting the incumbent reelected. Now, the second thing I'm going to fight for is term limits, because I don't believe that congressmen need to be in Washington for more than 12 years. So 2 terms for a senator, and I believe 4 terms in the House should be enough. I mean, everything I've ever done in business, I've gotten done in a lot less than that amount of time. And if you can't make your contribution in 12 years, then maybe you're just not cut out for that line of work. But I go back to the example that was set by our founding fathers, the 56 men who signed the Declaration of Independence. And these were people of tremendous accomplishment before they were selected by their countrymen to go to Philadelphia then and serve. And they weren't going down there with the idea that they would stay forever. They went down, they did a job, they got their job done, and they came home. And the job they did was really quite remarkable. When you think about it, the Declaration of Independence, brief, absolutely brilliant, just inspired. And so was the Constitution. The Constitution, as it was originally written, was only 15 pages. In typewritten, it would be 15 pages. And that's the 7 articles that define how the country would be run, and the Bill of Rights, which defined the 5 freedoms. Today, we see the Congress coming out with, in this healthcare bill, is 1,018 pages. I mean, even the Old Testament of the Bible wasn't even close to 1,000 pages. How does a healthcare bill end up being that big? It's just sloppy thinking from top to bottom. But to get back to the example, I think these founding fathers set an example for public servants that's been rarely matched. The last line of the Declaration of Independence said, "We pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor." Can you? The other thing is that we've just got unconscionable partisanship, and somehow or another that's got to be fixed. You know, there are good people on both sides, I'm sure, and there are good ideas on both sides, but there's a culture in Washington that if it's your idea and not mine, it's a bad idea, and just so many votes you see going straight down the line, where all the Democrats are on one side and all the Republicans are on another, and that just can't be good governance. We've got to break those log jams and just try and find people who have some common sense and who can see good ideas on both sides and work together to get the best possible legislation. I think at this point we need term limits so desperately. I think there's no single thing we could do for our country that would improve our country more than to limit the amount of time that people spend in Washington. We don't need any more career politicians, and we don't need to put people in Washington that want to become career politicians. What we need is we need people who are going to go down there and straighten out this government, who are going to go down and hold the government to budgets and shrink the size of the government, and who are going to fight corruption and not put up with it. And I'm willing to do that. These are things I do not put up with. I'm not going to Washington to make friends. I've got plenty of friends up here. I'm not going down to Washington to make a career of it or to enrich myself. You know, Sue and I have done just fine. We're going to go down there and see if we can make a difference. And then when we're done making a difference, we're going to come back to New Hampshire.